The Elves and the Shoemaker. Once upon a time, in a small, cozy town, there was a kind old shoemaker named Mr. Sam. Mr. Sam loved making shoes, but he was getting older and had very little money left to buy leather. One day, he had just enough leather to make one last pair of shoes. As the sun began to set, Mr. Sam cut the leather into the shape of a shoe. He was very tired, so he decided to leave the leather on his workbench and finish the shoes in the morning. He went to bed, hoping that tomorrow would be a better day. That night, while Mr. Sam was fast asleep, something magical happened. Two tiny elves, no bigger than your thumb, appeared in his workshop. They had twinkling eyes and wore little green outfits. The elves saw the pieces of leather on the workbench and decided to help Mr. Sam. With nimble fingers, they stitched and sewed, working quickly and quietly. By the time the sun began to rise, the elves had made the most beautiful pair of shoes Mr. Sam had ever seen. They smiled at their work and disappeared just as the first light of morning peeked through the window. When Mr. Sam woke up, he went to his workshop and was amazed to find the perfect pair of shoes on his workbench. He couldn't believe his eyes. He wondered who could have made them, but he was also very happy because the shoes were so lovely. He put the shoes in his shop window, and soon a rich man walked by and saw them. The rich man loved the shoes so much that he bought them for a lot of money. With the money he earned from selling the beautiful shoes, Mr. Sam bought more leather. That night, he cut the new leather into pieces for 2 pairs of shoes and went to bed, hoping the elves would come again. Just like before, the 2 little elves appeared. They worked quickly and quietly, sewing the pieces into 2 perfect pairs of shoes. When Mr. Sam woke up, he was thrilled to see the new shoes. He put them in his shop window, and soon more people came and bought them for a good price. Mr. Sam was very happy because he could now buy even more leather and make more shoes. This wonderful magic continued night after night. The elves came and made beautiful shoes, and Mr. Sam sold them during the day. He became very successful and was able to buy nicer clothes and better food. But Mr. Sam couldn't stop thinking about who was helping him every night. One night, Mr. Sam and his wife, Mrs. Lily, decided to stay up and find out who their helpers were. They hid behind a curtain in the workshop and waited. Just as the clock struck midnight, the elves appeared. Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily watched as the little elves worked quickly, stitching and sewing with their tiny fingers. The elves finished their work and left quietly before dawn. Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily were so grateful to the elves for their help. They wanted to do something special to thank them. So, Mrs. Lily made tiny clothes and shoes for the elves. She sewed little green coats, trousers, and shoes that would fit them perfectly. Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily left the tiny clothes and shoes on the workbench that night and went to bed. When the elves arrived and saw the tiny clothes and shoes, their eyes sparkled with joy. They quickly put on their new outfits and danced around the workshop. They were so happy and thankful for the gifts. After that night, the elves never came back to the workshop. But Mr. Sam didn't mind. He was now a successful shoemaker and could make beautiful shoes on his own. With his new success, Mr. Sam decided to expand his shop. He added a section for children's shoes and even started making boots for the winter season. His shop became the talk of the town, and people came from far and wide to buy his wonderful shoes. As time went on, Mr. Sam noticed that people were smiling more and seemed happier when they wore his shoes. He believed that the elves had put a little bit of magic into each pair they made, spreading joy wherever the shoes went. Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily always remembered the elves with great fondness and gratitude. One cold winter evening, as Mr. Sam was closing his shop, a poor family came to the door. Their shoes were worn out, and their clothes were thin. They had traveled a long way and had no money left. Mr. Sam's heart went out to them. He invited them inside and gave them warm shoes and coats free of charge. The family was so thankful, and they left with smiles on their faces. Seeing their happiness reminded Mr. Sam of the kindness the elves had shown him. He decided to make it a tradition to help those in need, especially during the holiday season. Every year, he would make extra pairs of shoes and give them to the less fortunate. His generosity made the town a much warmer and kinder place. Mr. Sam's shop continued to flourish, and he became known not only for his beautiful shoes, but also for his big heart. He and Mrs. Lily lived happily, always remembering the magical elves who had changed their lives. As Mr. Sam grew older, he began to teach his craft to young apprentices. He shared with them the story of the elves and the importance of kindness and hard work. The apprentices learned quickly and soon became talented shoemakers themselves. They carried on Mr. Sam's tradition of helping others, ensuring that his legacy lived on. The little workshop that had once been quiet and humble was now filled with laughter and the busy sounds of shoemaking. Mr. Sam would often sit by the window, watching the apprentices work and remembering the night the elves first appeared. He knew that the magic of kindness and generosity was still alive in his shop. One snowy evening, many years later, Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily were sitting by the fireplace, enjoying a cup of hot cocoa. They looked back on their lives with happiness and pride. They had been blessed with the help of the elves, and they had used that blessing to spread joy and kindness to others. As they sat there, they heard a faint tapping on the window. When they looked, they saw two tiny figures in the snow, dressed in the little green outfits Mrs. Lily had made so many years ago. The elves smiled and waved, and then, just as quickly as they had come, they disappeared into the night. Mr. Sam and Mrs. Lily smiled at each other, knowing that the magic of the elves was still with them. They had lived a life filled with love, kindness, and generosity, and they knew that the elves would always be a part of their story. The moral of the story. We learn from Mr. Sam and the elves that kindness and hard work can bring wonderful rewards. When we help others and show gratitude, magic can happen in our lives too. Let's always remember to be kind and thankful for the help we receive from others. By spreading joy and generosity, we can make the world a better place.